I'm called Sarah. At 32, my own sibling attempted to publicly shame me by leaving me with a $4,000 celebration dinner cost. Prior to explaining how a single custom-created pamphlet finished her engagement and started an IR inquiry, tell me which location you're reviewing from within the responses. It's constantly wonderful to observe how distant these narratives travel. To genuinely comprehend that evening, you must comprehend the structure of my household. It functioned on a basic, unmentioned regulation. My younger sibling, Megan, was the child, and I was a world that existed to circle her, silently offering gravitational assistance. Megan was the precious child, the one whose joy was celebrated and whose sorrow brought the universe to a stop. I was the dependable one, the one whose accomplishments were anticipated and whose difficulties were my own to resolve. This wasn't a subtle pattern. It was the foundation of our existence. So I recall when we were in secondary school, I studied endlessly. For my SATs, gained entry to a quality state college with a partial grant, and my parents acknowledged, pleased, excellent work, Sarah. We knew you would. It was an expectation fulfilled, a task completed. 2 years afterward, Megan decided she didn't wish to attend college immediately. She wished to travel to Europe for the season to discover herself. Then my parents withdrew a substantial amount of the college fund they had reserved aside for me to pay for her journey. Megan possesses a creative spirit, my mother clarified. She cannot be hurried. You're intelligent, Sarah. You'll determine the fees. I determined it by accepting thousands of dollars in additional student debt, a burden I was still repaying. Megan returned from Europe with sign and a dislike for anything that wasn't luxury. This sequence repeated itself constantly. Holiday season was a typical illustration. Every year, I would travel the 2 hours to my parents' residence a day early to assist me mom prepare, tidy, and package gifts. Megan would arrive on holiday morning, an hour delayed, appearing stunning. She'd offer my parents with some expensive and personal present from a fancy store, and they would react like she'd personally crafted it from gold material. I'd spend the day refilling beverages and removing dishes. And at the conclusion of the evening, Megan would embrace me and say, appreciate all your assistance, sister. Couldn't have accomplished it without you, as though I were the employed assistants. So, I constructed me own existence. I became an IT project supervisor, creating a profession in a field that appreciated logic, skill, and outcomes. I was skilled at my position. I handled multi-million-dollar software implementations, navigated complex corporate affairs, and received a decent income. My existence had structure and reliability, a direct opposite to the chaotic, drama-filled universe Megan occupied. Then arrived the contact. Megan, her voice excited with a victory that was almost frantic, declared she was engaged to Tyler Wellington. The Wellingtons weren't just wealthy, they were an empire. They possessed a collection of luxury accommodations that covered the world. Their reputation was equivalent with old wealth and silent, impressive authority. For Megan, this wasn't a union. It was her crowning, and I knew with the sinking certainty of a lifetime of knowledge that I would be anticipated to support the fabric of her dress. This must be flawless, Sarah, she announced on the first of many planning conversations. Her voice was demanding. The Wellingtons are a different category. We must demonstrate to them that I originate from a quality household, a household that comprehends excellence. The irony was a harsh reality. I was to be the designer of an illusion using my time and effort to project an image of natural class that our household simply did not have. I spent the following several weeks in a haze. By day, I was negotiating agreements with suppliers and supervising developers. By evening, I was on the device with florists, debating about the subtle distinctions between cream and ivory flowers. I created the invitations myself, using my graphic design ability. Esto produced something that appeared like it cost a fortune. Megan's only participation was to criticize my font selections. My mother's conversations were even worse. Sarah, you know, this is your sibling's own major opportunity, she'd say, her voice filled with a familiar combination of hope and warning. At Tyler's household is very powerful. An alliance like this could help all of us. Please ensure everything is perfect. Don't disappoint Megan. The unspoken communication was clear. My siblings' joy was a household project and my role was supervisor. The celebration dinner was at Bellevue, a restaurant that seemed less like a public location and more like a private organization. The guest roster was a tight 14 people. A carefully selected audience for the evening's show IT was Megan and Tyler. Their respective parents, Tyler's impressive grandparents, his impeccably dressed sibling Olivia, a handful of Wellington relatives who all appeared like they'd emerged from a sailing magazine, and me. I was the appendix on the guest roster, present. But not crucial. I arrived 30 minutes early, my project supervisor instincts activating. I smoothed the tablecloths, verified the seating arrangement, and spoke with the host. I wore a simple, elegant dark dress, the most costly piece of clothing I possessed. I had even spent extra on getting my hair professionally arranged. I desired, just for one evening, to not be at a disappointment. Megan arrived and destroyed that hope in seconds. Her vision did a quick, dismissive examination of my entire appearance. "Is that what you're wearing?" she asked, a small wrinkle of displeasure forming on her nose. "It appears cheap." Our mother Diana appeared at her side, a human barrier of validation. "You could have made more of an effort, Sarah. It's your only siblings. Special evening." They stood there, a united front of silent condemnation. It was the narrative of my existence, condensed into a single, painful moment. Then the Wellingtons arrived and the temperature in the space seemed to drop 10 degrees. They were a vision of understated, intimidating wealth. Tyler's mother, Eleanor, offered me a hand that was cold and weak. Her handshake was a dismissal. Tyler's sibling, Olivia, who was probably only 24, but carried herself with the authority of a CEO, gave my dress a long, slow evaluation that seemed like she was calculating its thread count and finding it lacking. I was introduced as Megan's sibling, Sarah. And then effectively became invisible. For the following 2 hours, I was a ghost who served a function. While Megan laughed and sparkled, captivating her audience, I was the one ensuring the show ran smoothly. I took pictures on everyone's devices, becoming the unofficial event photographer. I discreetly signaled servers when a wine glass was empty. I ensured the background music was at a level that facilitated conversation without interfering. I was an unpaid event coordinator, and Meow household seemed perfectly content with that arrangement. My parents were in full servant mode, laughing with jarring enthusiasm at Mr. Wellington's dry jokes and filling their conversation with comments about Megan's natural elegance. The financial bleeding began subtly. Tyler's father, a man with a booming voice and an air of absolute entitlement, ordered a $500 bottle of champagne without even glancing at the wine menu. When it was empty, he ordered another. Olivia, with a casual wave of her hand, requested an off-menu appetizer she'd had at their sister restaurant in Paris. The Wellington relatives decided they wished to sample the menu and ordered multiple courses each. Megan, far from being embarrassed, actively encouraged it. When I caught her eye with a questioning look, she just gave me a radiant smile and mouthed the words, "Only the finest." It was a command. I watched it all unfold with a growing sense of dread. This wasn't a celebration. It was a display of financial dominance, a way off marking territory, and I was beginning to seem like the territory being marked. Finally, after an array of elaborate desserts had been cleared, the server approached the table. He moved with the silent grace of a diplomat entering a hostile negotiation. In his hand was a single heavy leather-bound folder. He placed it in the exact center of the table, with a soft thud that echoed in the sudden silence. It sat there like a time bomb. 14 pairs of vision were fixed on it. For a heart-stopping moment, nobody moved. My hand instinctively started to move toward it, my mind already doing the math of a 14-way split, but Megan was faster. Her manicured fingers darted out and snatched the folder. She flipped it open. Her vision scanned the contents for less than a second. And then, with a small, deliberate smile, she slid the folder across the polished wood surface. It stopped directly in front of me. My hand seemed disconnected from my body. I opened it. The paper was thick, creamy, and heavy. The number at the bottom of the long itemized list was printed in a crisp, unforgiving font. $4,786. The space tilted, my breath caught in my throat. I looked up, my vision finding Megan's across the table. This is for everyone," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Megan's laugh was bright and clear, designed to carry. "Of course it is. You're hosting. Silly. Remember? We talked about it." We had not talked about it. This was an ambush, a public execution. Eleanor Wellington, sensing blood in the water, raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Her voice was like a shard of ice. Is there a problem? Their gazes were like physical blows. My mother's vision were narrowed. Shooting daggers off warning. My father was pointedly staring at his water glass. My sibling's smile was wide and benevolent, the look of a queen bestowing a great honor upon a lowly subject. This was my moment to step up, to prove I was worthy of being associated with them. A strange, cold clarity washed over me. The hurt was there, a deep, familiar ache. But underneath it, something else was hardening, a decision. This was a game, and for the first time in my existence, I wasn't going to play by their rules. No problem at all, I said. My voice shockingly steady. I raked into my purse, my movements measured and calm. I pulled out my primary credit card and handed it to the server. He took it and glided away. Under the table, Megan's hand found mine and squeezed it hard. I knew I could count on you, she whispered, her voice thick with triumph. The Wellingtons are seriously impressed. The 5 minutes that followed were the longest of my existence. The table buzzed with renewed conversation, the tension broken. I seemed like I was underwater, the sounds distant and distorted. Then I saw the server returning. His face was a mask of professional discomfort. He walked directly to me. He leaned in, keeping his voice low, but in the expectant hush that had fallen once more, his words were a cannon blast. I'm terribly sorry, Miss Sarah, but your card has been declined. The silence that crashed down was absolute. It was a physical thing pressing in on all of us. I looked at Megan. Her face, which had been glowing with smug satisfaction, had gone completely white. She appeared like she'd been slapped. I summoned every bit of acting skill I possessed. I appeared surprised, confused. That's strange, I said, pulling out my device and theatrically tapping open my banking app. I ensured the screen was angled just so. Wow, it shows I only have $10,342 available in my checking. I must have forgotten to transfer funds from my savings account after I closed on that investment property last week. The two key phrases, savings account and investment property, did their work. I saw Tyler's father, Mr. Wellington, sit up a little straighter. His vision, which had dismissed me all evening, were now filled with a new, sharp interest. A man who understood. Wealth had just heard keywords he recognized. Megan's mortification was curdling into fury. You don't have $4,000, she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper that still carried across the table. Not in checking, I replied, my voice calm and reasonable. Most of my liquid assets are tied up in my investment portfolio, and the bank is closed now. Of course, Eleanor Wellington's lips were a thin, bloodless line. The grand illusion of effortless generosity had been shattered. Perhaps, she said, her voice stiff with disapproval. We should just split the bill. No, Megan protested, her voice high and desperate. This was not how her script was supposed to go. This is our celebration dinner. I can contribute me $13, I offered with a helpful smile. The server, a statue of composure, stepped in. The remaining amount could be divided among the other guests. Madam, I can easily process multiple payments. The chaotic scramble that followed was a thing of beauty. Mr. and Mrs. Wellington reluctantly produced an Amex black card, their faces grim. Olivia suddenly remembered she'd left her purse in the car. My own parents fumbled for excuses, muttering about assuming everything was taken care of. Tyler, to his credit, appeared like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole as he pulled out his own wallet. The magnificent, impressive performance of the Wellington household had ended in a tacky, squabbling mess over who would pay for their own extravagance. The real explosion happened in the valet area. How could you? Megan shrieked, her voice echoing off the luxury cars. She was shaking with rage. How could you humiliate me like that in front of them? Humiliate you? The dam of my composure finally broke. A lifetime of suppressed anger came roaring to the surface. You set me up, Megan. You put me on stage and ordered me to perform a financial striptease for your wealthy new household. It wasn't a striptease. It was a test of your loyalty and my chance to show the Wellingtons I come from a household that supports each other by bankrupting me for a dinner party. That's not support. That's parasitism. It's just wealth. You make a huge salarian that boring IT position. A real sibling would have been happy to do it. Our mother rushed to her side, wrapping a protective arm around Megan's shoulders. She turned to me, her face a mask of weary disappointment. Sarah, honestly, your sibling is right. You could have handled that with more grace. You have a good position. It was your responsibility to handle it. Now the Wellingtons think we're common. That word again. Common. I got in my car and drove home, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The conversation replayed in my head, a toxic loop of entitlement and blame. It wasn't just about the wealth. It was about the expectation. The absolute unquestioned belief that my resources, my time, my energy, my wealth were theirs to command. The following morning, my device was a digital assault. A dozen texts from Megan escalating from furious to pathetic. A string of guilt-laden messages from my mother about how I had deeply embarrassed the household. But it was the text from Olivia Wellington that pushed me over the edge. Megan said, "You're supposed to be some hotshot executive, but you can't even cover a dinner." Embarrassing. The cold, calculated cruelty of it lit a fire in me. This wasn't a spontaneous household drama, this was a coordinated attack. A strange methodical curiosity began to replace the raw hurt. I opened Instagram. There it was. Megan's story from the evening before. A picture of her and Tyler. The caption. Major evening. Let's see if major sister comes through. Household test. Know your worth. My blood ran cold. Household test. It had a name. It was a strategy. I started digging. I scrolled back through months of her posts and a sick pattern emerged of posts about high-value households, setting standards, and testing the loyalty of those around you. Then I found her TikTok account linked in a different bio. This was a different Megan. This was Megan, the lifestyle strategist, and her content was a sociopath's playbook. How to get others to pay for your lifestyle, making your household prove their love through generosity, and then the video that stopped my heart. It was from 3 weeks prior, Megan smirking into the camera. So, Ms. Sibling makes a 6-figure salary but acts totally broke. It's time to test her commitment. Got a big household event coming up where she can really show her support for my new existence. I'll let you all know how my little #household test goes. I wasn't a sibling. It wasn't a guest. I was a storyline. My humiliation was her content. The pain didn't go away. It transmuted. It turned from a hot, messy emotion into something cold, hard, and focused. The IT project supervisor in me, the part that builds systems, saw a system of manipulation that needed to be dismantled, documented, and destroyed. My first step was data collection. I used a web scraping tool to download every video, every post. I archived every text message. I created a spreadsheet, a timeline of her manipulation, then I remembered a name, Rachel, Tyler's ex-girlfriend. A quick search, a carefully worded message, and we were on the device. The household test. Rachel's laugh was brittle. Oh, honey, you got off easy. They tried to get me to co-sign a lease on a ridiculously expensive apartment for Tyler to prove my long-term commitment, when I said no. Eleanor told Tyler I clearly had trust issues and was marriage material. She was a goldmine of information. This is what they do, she explained, her voice low and serious. The Wellingtons are obsessed with loyalty, but their definition of loyalty is financial submission. They did it to a business partner of Mr. Wellington's, leaving him on the hook for a massive dinner in Hong Kong. There was a messy situation with a relative's inheritance where they tried to pressure his fiancée into giving up her stake. They even used Tyler's grandfather's funeral as a high-stakes networking event. They are emotional vampires with impeccable pedigrees. Then she gave me the final piece of the puzzle. And Megan fits right in. She once bragged to me that she was writing off designer clothes and expensive meals business expenses for her influencer brand. She said, and I quote, "The IRS is too busy to worry about a small fish like me." When I hung up, my path was clear. This Wasn't just about a household feud anymore, this was bigger, this was about justice. My mind, trained to see flowcharts and project plans, began to build one. My first move was quiet and anonymous. I compiled a detailed tip for the IRS, complete with screenshots of Megan's social media, her Venmo requests disguised as business transactions, and Rachel's testimony. The subject line was potential tax fraud by a social media influencer. My second move targeted their reputation. I drafted a professional detailed letter to the CEO of the Bellevue Hospitality Group. I outlined the entire coordinated scheme, attaching evidence. I framed it not as a personal complaint, but as a warning about a systemic abuse of their brand that posed a significant legal and reputational risk. My final move would be personal. It will be my masterpiece. The wedding shower was 2 months late at the Wellington's Country Club. It was a sea of pastel dresses and passive aggression. Megan, glowing with self-satisfaction, greeted me with a frosty hug. "Glad you could make it," she said sweetly. "Try not to cause a scene this time." "I'll do my best," I replied, my smile just as sweet. The gifts were presented one by one. When my turn came, I walked forward with a heavy flat box beautifully wrapped in silver paper with a dark silk ribbon. "Oh, Sarah, you shouldn't have," Megan gushed, clearly expecting a large check as an apology. She opened the box. Inside, nestled on dark velvet, were 5 slim hardcover booklets. They were professionally printed and bound with a simple, elegant title embossed in gold foil on the cover. "Our Household Values, a Case Study." A flicker of confusion crossed her face. I smiled, took the other 4 booklets, and walked to the main table. I placed one in front of my mother, one in front of my father, one in front of a stone-faced Eleanor Wellington, and the last one directly in front of Tyler. "I wanted to create something special," I said, my voice clear and calm, "to commemorate the unique values that our 2 households cherish so deeply." The other guests saw nothing but a thoughtful, if unusual, gift. But at hat table, a silent bomb had just been armed. Megan opened hers. I watched the blood drain from her face as she saw the first page, a high-resolution photo of her and Tyler from the celebration dinner with the heading Chapter 1, the celebration dinner test. Below it was a screenshot of her own Instagram post. The hashtag household test circled in glaring red. I watched Eleanor's composure crack as she flipped to Chapter 2, a history of manipulation, which featured a timeline of their other tests. I saw my mother's hand fly to her mouth, but it was Chapter 3 that ended it all. The title was Financial Strategy, and the IRS contained screenshots of Megan's posts bragging about her deductions, a copy of the Venmo request she sent me after the dinner, and a concise layman's terms definition of tax fraud. Tyler stared at the booklet, then he looked at Megan, his face a mask of utter revulsion. He had just been handed a dossier on the character of the woman he was about to marry. The Wellingtons weren't just embarrassed, they were implicated. Their carefully constructed universe of power and prestige was threatened by a few pages of verifiable truth. Megan looked up, her vision blazing with a mixture of hatred and panic. "What is this?" she hissed. "Documentation," I replied, my voice even. "I'm a project supervisor. After all, I document everything." "I thought you all should have a copy of the project plan." The fallout was swift and spectacular. The party ended in a flurry of hushed, frantic whispers. The following day, an announcement was made. The wedding was indefinitely postponed. A few weeks later, I got the contact from Megan about the IRS audit. I told her to hire a lawyer and blocked her number. My parents contacted next. A joint attack. My father started. "Sarah, I don't know what you think you were doing." I cut him off. "I know exactly what I was doing. You was holding up a mirror. If you don't like the reflection, that's not my problem. My mother took the device. You've ruined your siblings' existence. All over a little wealth. It was never about the wealth, Mom. It was about respect, something you and Dad taught me the value of by never ever giving it to me. You chose your golden child. Now you get to live with her. Goodbye." I ended the contact. 6 months passed. 6 peaceful, quiet months. I got the promotion to director of IT at my firm. The confidence I had found in confronting my household had spilled over into my professional existence. I was no longer afraid to challenge stakeholders or push back on unrealistic deadlines. One day, Olivia Wellington asked to meet me for coffee. She was humbled, subdued. I wanted to apologize, she said. What you did was seismic. It shook our entire household. My father respects nothing but strength. And that day, he saw you as the strongest person in the space. It forced us to see ourselves. Tyler is in therapy. He's a different person. It was a strange, unexpected form of validation. I started dating someone new, an architect named Ben. He was kind, funny, and brilliant. One evening, I found myself passionately explaining the intricacies of a server migration project I was leading. I went in for 10 minutes, deep in the technical weeds. I stopped abruptly, embarrassed. I'm so sorry, I said. I must be boring you to tears. He just looked at me, his expression full of genuine fascination. Boring me? Are you kidding? The way your mind works is incredible. Please tell me more. In that moment, I seemed seen in a way my own household had never made me feel. I kept the framed restaurant bill in my home office for a while. It was a reminder of my graduation day, the day I graduated from being a doormat, but last week, I took it down from the wall. I walked over to the heavy-duty paper shredder I use for sensitive corporate documents. I fed the bill into the slot. The machine roared to existence, its steel teeth grabbing the paper and pulling it in. In seconds, the symbol of my most expensive and valuable lesson was reduced to a pile of meaningless crosscut confetti. He had shredded the contract, I had closed the project, I was free. And that's my narrative. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the conclusion. It means a lot to share this. I have a question for all of you. Have you ever had to make a tough choice to stand up for yourself against your own household? Let me know your narrative in the responses below. I read as many as I can. If this narrative resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more narratives about finding your strength. I'll see you in the next one.